Hi everyone, and welcome to another instalment of Dural Anglican Kids Online. My name's Dural, and today we're going to hear a story that Jesus tells about a young man who left home. But before we get to any of that, let's meet our expert builder for today. Hi Bradley!
Hello.
You know, Jesus often used stories to teach us what God's kingdom would be like. And today, Jesus tells a story so that we will know, no matter what we've done or how far away we've wandered from God, He will always welcome us back when we return to Him and we ask for His forgiveness. So, let's listen to this story that Jesus tells. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." It's an awful thing to say. The son is saying to his dad, "I wish you were dead, because then I could have my inheritance now." Oh, I wonder how that would make you feel. I'd feel sad, maybe angry at my son too. But this dad gives his son what he asks for. So Jesus continues his story. Not long after, the young man packed up everything he owned and left for a foreign country where he wasted all his money in wild living. He spent everything. But soon, a bad famine spread throughout the whole land. Soon he had nothing to eat. And so for the very first time in his life, this young man suddenly was hungry and lonely and a long way from home. I wonder what he's going to do. Well, Jesus tells us. He went to work for a man who sent him out to take care of his pigs. He would have been glad to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Have you ever been to a pig farm? They stink. And maybe it was the smell that woke this young man up. Because listen to what Jesus says next. The young man came to his senses and said, "My father's workers have plenty to eat, and here I am starving to death. I'll go to my father and I'll say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against God in heaven, and I've sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called one of your sons.'" Now, do you remember from last week, we thought about that word from the Bible, that word called sin. Sin is when we live our way instead of God's way. And look at what sin does to this young man. Firstly, it stops him being friends with God in heaven. Sin stops this young man being friends with his dad. And sin leaves this young man hungry and lonely and a long way from home. Let's take a look at this clip, which tells us about this story in more detail.
Jesus told them another story. Once, a man had two sons. The younger son said to his father, "Give me my share of the property." So the father divided his property between his two sons. Not long after that, the younger son packed up everything he owned and left for a foreign country where he wasted all his money in wild living. He had spent everything when a bad famine spread through that whole land. Soon, he had nothing to eat. He went to work for a man in that country, and the man sent him out to take care of his pigs. He would have been glad to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one gave him a thing. Finally, he came to his senses and said, "My father's workers have plenty to eat, and here I am, starving to death. I will go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against God in heaven and against you. I am no longer good enough to be called your son. Treat me like one of your workers.'"
It's so sad. When this young man lived with his dad, he had everything he needed. But now, he's in a foreign country, a long way from home, hungry and poor. Well, he decides to go home, but, well, things can't go back to normal, not after the way he's treated his dad. I mean, how could they go back to normal? So he plans to apologise to his father. But remember why Jesus is telling this story. Jesus wants us to know that no matter what we've done or how far we've wandered away, God our Father will always welcome us back if we return to Him. So look what happens. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt sorry for him. He ran to his son, he hugged him, and he kissed him. This is exactly how God in heaven will treat us when we return to Him. Have a look at this clip and see what happens next.
The youngest son got up and started back to his father. But when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt sorry for him. He ran to his son and hugged him and kissed him. The son said, "Father, I have sinned against God in heaven and against you. I am no longer good enough to be called your son." But his father said to his servants, "Hurry, bring the best clothes and put them on him. Give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Get the best calf and prepare it so we can eat and celebrate. This son of mine was dead, but has now come back to life. He was lost and now has been found." And they began to celebrate.
Wow! Just like the father in this story, Jesus wants us to know that when we turn back to God our Father, He will welcome us home with joy and gladness. And you know, the good news is, kids, you can pray to God right now. You can ask Him to forgive you for those times when you've lived your way instead of His way. And the good news is God will always forgive you. He loves to answer that prayer. So I hope to see you next week, kids. Bye!